Well, John, my name is John Murphy, and I was born in Tipperary in Ireland. I came out here in 1949, and I was kind of wandering around. I didn't have any relations out in Australia, and I was wandering around from job to job. And 1950, a year went by, and 1950 came up, and I seen a newspaper one day with an ad in it saying that the Australian government was looking for trained soldiers to make up a contingent to go to the war in Korea. I was a non-commissioned officer in the Irish Army before I came out here, so I said, oh, maybe they will take me, you know. And I didn't like communism, and that's what happened in the Korean War. The North invaded the South, the communists. And I said, well, I might, they're looking for a trained soldier called K-Force to augment the 3rd Battalion, which was stationed in Japan as an occupation force. So I said, well, I'll try it in. I contacted Swanbourne Barracks, and they said, yeah, they're looking for trained soldiers. And I got a doctor's examination. In 3 days, I was on my way to Puckapunyal in Victoria. And another 5 weeks, refresher course in Puckapunyal Army Base, I was on my way to Japan and Korea. And that's how I got to the war, you know. Bit of a difference in some of the things in the Australian Army. They had a light machine gun which was called a Bren gun, and we were trained with a Lewis gun. But it didn't take long to work out what the difference was, so I graduated to a Bren gun. And I finished up in the 3rd Battalion, and I found out that the Australian soldiers were very good as far as the old ones. You know, there was a lot of them in K-Force who were Second World War veterans and rejoined up for various reasons. Some probably didn't quite fit back into modern society as it was then, and decided to have a go again in Korea. And they were pretty good because they knew exactly what war was about, and they blokes like me that did have army experience but not battle experience, they kind of shielded us a bit, gave us some hints on what to expect and what to do and how to work things out, like, you know. So I found that very good. And on top of that, my father served at Gallipoli. He was with an Irish regiment in the British Army, and he served alongside the Australians at Gallipoli. And he used to tell me what the Australians were like. You know, they were well respected as some of the top soldiers in the Second World War, especially at Gallipoli. And of course that always stuck in my mind when I came out here, and I kind of it worked with the ones that were with me in Korea. They were not hard to kind of get on with, you know. The Irish seemed to have a bit of a rapport with them, so I was pretty lucky in a way that I fitted in, put it that way. And I never regretted it. Went through, I was wounded at Kapyong, and I was being pretty well looked after since then by the Department of Veterans Affairs. They made me a TPI. So I'm quite, you know, have been looked after even during the war and a long, long time after the war. Well, I say we didn't really have that much chance of kind of having anything to do with the Korean people. It was a devastated country then. It was right, the war was raging, and first we noticed on our way up to the front was the burnt out towns and villages, and that people were kind of they were just moving around like they was trying to find some place where they could start to make a life again. And carrying their belongings with them, it was horrible, you know, to see that happening. But we didn't really get that much chance to have any interaction with the Korean people. But one thing I found out about the Korean people was that during the war years, and especially up in the hills, when the Australians were finding it hard to get supplies up, because there was no way in the world could you get any trucks, jeeps or anything. Everything had to be carried by hand because there's hundreds of meters up in these mountains, and they got these Korean porters. They were volunteers, guys who were maybe too old to serve in the Korean army, or maybe had some sort of something wrong with them physically, and they were in what they call, made them into squads of Korean porters, and they carried these ammunition, food, right up into these mountains, just supplying us, and they weren't armed, and they were often under fire, so you had to take your head off to them, you know. So that was really the most I had to do with as far as Korean people go. We had just come down from the mountains. We were up there about 6 weeks, and boy, were we looking forward to a rest area, because the underclouds were rotting. You know, they were just 6 weeks in the sleeping and in the ground. You know, and hutchies and holes in the ground for 6 weeks. You can imagine what there was no supply. The food was coming up and ammunition, but no clothing and things. You know, so what you were wearing, you had. And after 6 weeks, we had we were told we would come to a place called for a rest area. And I said, oh, great. And they had 44-gallon drums filled it with water and put a hole in it. We just stood underneath and let the water pour down, and it matted hair, you know, and just let the water wash the underwear off. we got 2 or 3 underpants, shirts, singlets, clean underwear. We got toothpaste. First time we got toothpaste, there was a Salvation Army block there for handing out a pack of, you know, toothpaste. Crowd, and we were going to have a get together with the Kiwis, with the Turks. The Turkish brigade was only a few kilometres away. They were in a rest area too, and they were going to have a couple of either a football game or a soccer game or whatever, you know, just to get together. And that would have been a historic event, because they are 50 years after, hated enemies, and they're meeting again as friends, you know, they were friends, not foes. And we were all looking forward to that. And then suddenly somebody said, pack your gear. And where are we going? Oh, we're just going up to a place called Kapyong. We're going to dig in and wait just in case something happens up the front. Because we knew that there was a South Korean division in front of us, 10,000 South Korean troops fully armed with American equipment, the latest equipment, you know, the Garland rifles, which they were rapid fire ones, you know, for single fire with, they had the old 303 rifles that they had in the First World War. So we were a bit envious of the Americans supplying the South Koreans with their equipment, and we getting the old, anyway. So we dug in, and we even got mail. They brought up mail, the supply people brought mail up, and we were even supplied with a hot meal at Kapyong, where we dug in and all this. Everyone was expecting to be pulling out again and going back to the rest place where we were and carrying on with the old news. They were going to send up some movies, and then somebody said, no, they could hear the rumble, and there was these refugees coming down the valley, you know. We were on the side of both sides of this Kapyong road, running through alongside the Kapyong River. And there was the refugees were carrying down, they were carrying their stuff on their back. There was bullocks loaded with stuff, children, and then there had crowds of South Korean soldiers panicking, coming down, trucks and, you know, thousands of people coming to see. We didn't know what was happening. We didn't get much information, and we didn't have what you call, in a case like that, we probably would have been, if we knew that there was going to be a breakthrough, we would have had some extra provisions and also extra ammunition, but we thought we were just going to be there for a while, until just in case type of thing. And then come the Chinese. And boy, did they come. I was in one platoon, A company, and a sergeant came around, gave us 2 extra grenades. That was all we had, an extra ammunition. And said that it looks like we're going to be in for we could hear the shots firing, the Chinese started to intermingle with the South Koreans and the refugees, and they were stirring it up. And we knew that they were going to get through, and we knew that we were going to be surrounded, because once the refugees and the South Koreans retreated, the Chinese just go down and we're surrounded. So we knew we were going to be in for it, and sure enough, we had the whistles go, and we knew how they attacked. They used whistles. The squads used whistles to gather them together when they were attacking a position, and then they sounded the bugles. And I'm not sure what the bugles were for, whether they were for signals or whether they were for shoring up their courage. But they didn't give us courage. And then there was silence. And then they had these grenadiers with the grenades. They either had satchels, these grenadiers, these canvas satchels full of these stick grenades, or buckets full of grenades, and they move up to close to your position and they start hurling these grenades. But luckily enough, they were 8-second grenades, and they give you plenty of time to pick them up and chuck them back again, or duck well down in your gun pit. So they wasn't too bad, you know. But then of course you knew then after the grenadiers came the Chinese, and they came 5 times up till they started about 9:45 that night, and they came at us at one platoon 5 times until about 1 o'clock in the morning. And by that time we'd lost 17 killed and wounded in our platoon. So it was only, I'd been flattened by a grenade, you know, bowled over by a grenade, but was lucky enough to be able to still function. And a few more of the 13 that were left were also the same way. They were hit by fragmentation from the grenades. And if the company commander hadn't decided to pull the last of us up to company headquarters, we didn't have enough ammunition to ward off another attack, because we knew it was coming. We could hear the whistles going and the bugles. And then the company commander, Ben O'Dowd, sent down 2 runners, and a medical orderly said, right, pull back up to company headquarters. As we were pulling back, the Chinese were coming in and jumping into our weapon pits. If he hadn't given that order, we were gone to the world. We would have either been killed or prisoners of war, you know. So. But that was it. And then as soon as we got up to company headquarters, somebody gave us an extra bit of ammunition, and they attacked us from another side. So this went on all night, you know what I mean? So, and then A Company, which had around about 100 men, lost 50 casualties. And you had to endure the night with about, you know, there's at least 35 wounded fellows lined up on the back of the hill away from the firing. And you hear the moans and the cries of the wounded, and there's no help. We were surrounded, there was no help for them. There's no morphine, no nothing, and these blokes were laying in the cold with mortar fire going on and whatnot, knowing any minute that a shell might or a mortar might land in the middle of them. You know, it was hard just to put up with that, you know. That went on all night, and I'm sure most of the guys that were there were glad that they seen the daylight in the morning, and we knew what we could, you know, at least you had fields of fire then, and you could see what was coming at you. So, but we held on, and we survived. There's other things that happened during the day, you know, in the morning. The Americans accidentally dropped napalm on some of our fellows, and we had to tend to them, you know, and then when the fighting withdrawal was on, we had to carry them out. And the Australians won't leave wounded, you know, they might leave the dead, but they won't leave the wounded. And we had to carry them. You want to see those guys that were skinned with the napalm, you know, the face, you could see the bone of the jaw sticking out, and elbows and arms, clothes burned off, and just the bone, you know, and even that was burned brown, you know, from the napalm. It's terrible. And we had to bring them out. And we had taken 40 Chinese prisoners. One of the other companies had taken those prisoners. We had to bring those prisoners out with them. We used them to carry some of the wounded and some of the weapons that our dead and wounded had. So Ben O'Dowd was the A Company captain. He was made battle commander, and he organised a retreat. And it wasn't a rout, it was just a retreat, a fighting withdrawal. And we were hitting the Chinese as they were coming after us. And we had support from the New Zealand artillery, and then a couple of American tanks helped also stop the Chinese. And then the Chinese went over and hit the Canadians. So we were able to get away, you know. So and that was it. 2 days, well, one full day and a half a day, continuous fighting. And I'm telling you, they were pretty glad when they got out and we got into what they call brigade headquarters, where the Middlesex Battalion was. And that was as far as I was there, that was it, the Battle of Kapyong, you know. I always say it, and I'll say it again, it was the tenacity and the training and the Australian tradition is that they fight, when they go into a spot, they don't retreat. You'll either knock us off or we'll stay there. But the only reason that they withdrew there is because they ran out of ammunition, and we had no way of treating the wounded. We had 40 prisoners. We had some folks that were burning up with napalm. We had to get out to get them help, so that was the reason why they had the fighting withdrawal.